Are we? Very cool.
Yep, there we
Very
go.
cool. Hi, everybody. Yeah, we're live.
We're live.
This is awkward. Okay, everybody. Hello and welcome to the Pick Our Dang Brains podcast. We are two siblings who want to drop surprising knowledge and facts about history, art, and everything in between. This is episode 2, and we've each brought an interesting story to share. So every episode will follow this similar format. We're trying to go for 2 interesting, mysterious keywords. Each person will bring their keyword, and we'll see what comes out of it. So this episode is Sexy Graffiti and Franz Ferdinand.
All right.
What do you think about that so far?
It seems like a pretty diverse combination.
Yes, definitely.
All right.
Super diverse.
So you're starting?
Yeah, so I will start first. My story is on sexy graffiti. But I do want to start off by asking, what do you know about ancient Egypt?
Ancient Egypt. I know it's a very important time period. There were a lot of great culture and proto-scientists, and I know of a couple of pharaohs like Cleopatra and King Tut and Ramses the Second, and the pyramids, and that's basically it.
Yeah. It's pyramids and it's all those stone buildings that are left behind.
Right. It's that super old thing, that all like the science fiction movies have to go back and find all the aliens and stuff.
Oh my gosh. Ancient Aliens, that Ancient Aliens meme where it's the crazy hair guy and he's just like, aliens. Like that was always a sour point for me and my art history colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
So I minored in art history. So art history being the art of ancient cultures or art of past cultures, and we critique it, we analyze it. We analyze all of it as fine art, essentially. So we think about the patrons, who paid for this art, who created the art, what does that art represent from that society.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was in college, Ancient Aliens was really popular on TV, and that show definitely irked a lot of the like the Near East, like the Egyptian art teacher, the Native American, South American art teachers, Latin American art teachers, where it's stone carvings or stone buildings, funerary temples, things like that. They were created by the peoples of those times. It's not
Right,
aliens.
right.
That notion of these giant pyramids in Egypt are so impossible to create. People couldn't have created them because they're too primitive to create them. It must be aliens.
Mm-hmm.
Is a bit, it's dismissive or disrespectful to the fact that no, these were created by people, maybe thousands of people, but yes, these buildings were created by people before like modern technology,
right,
things like
right.
that.
Mm-hmm.
So Ancient Aliens is a sour point for some art historians for sure. Well, in talking about ancient Egypt, we think about, with our art history, we are able to understand that Egypt is a land of duality. So if you've heard the term Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, is actually the two lands are connected together. People who lived in the desert of Upper Egypt and people who lived in Lower Egypt who lived on the Nile. What's also interesting is like when you look at the globe, the Nile actually flows from south to north. So it goes, backwards. It goes like from south to north. So that's why Upper Egypt is actually down at the mouth or at the root of the Nile, and then Lower Egypt is at the mouth of the Nile that goes into the Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm.
So but yeah, life in the desert, life on the Nile, the combining of the two lands. the conflict of forces in nature are also always in pairs. So we understand Egyptian religion, where they talk about good and evil. The gods and goddesses represent different polarities and dualities. And so that leads to common artistic themes like representing a partnership or a joining of two themes. So often you will also see in some Egyptian art two plants, the lily and the papyrus. They're the two plants that represent Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, and they're often tied together in bundles. So sometimes when you see some Egyptian art, you'll see some like two different, like the lily, the white lily flower is tied with papyrus reed. So you'll see that in art because the pharaohs and the rulers of all the kingdoms would be ruler of or king of Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Okay. So it's really like a unification.
Kind of like the whole union of Britain, Scotland and England kind of thing. Same sort of symbology, I guess.
Yeah, similarly, yeah. But I think comparatively the Egyptian identity is more unified.
Right.
Scotland and Ireland, and English and Welsh people,
Yeah.
We can't forget about the Welsh too. But yeah, so definitely a stronger unification, I would say.
Okay.
So then we also understand, because the evidence that we have now is like huge structures of religion from ancient Egypt. We understand that art in ancient Egypt serves a magical function. So based on texts from hieroglyphics and more contemporary writings of understanding Egyptian religion, the people of that time believed that beings can manifest in images of themselves, including gods, goddesses, and the dead, therefore explaining why the Egyptian imagery is so, I would say is so vast. There's so many images of the god of Horus or the god of Osiris. There's so many different images over time, over thousands of years. The Egyptian pharaonic period is very long, and there's images recurring of gods, images of past pharaohs, images of the dead, the elite dead, because they had such a strong belief in keeping those images. So I feel like that's interesting comparatively, I think, to more contemporary religions where I don't think I feel like maybe in some Christian religions, like there is like the image of Jesus or the painting of the Last Supper, where there's more of, I feel like that's more used as a memorial or a reminder, but it's not that those people in that image will manifest out of this painting that's in my dining room, right?
It's like a symbol. It's not an artifact in its own right.
Yeah.
Whereas
yeah. So then, religion,
it's okay.
Yeah. So it's very like it's like if you draw it, then it'll come out and manifest itself. So very mystical. So then the art that survives would then theoretically still hold this mystical power if people still believed in those ancient religions. So that kind of plays into like, in pop culture where there's still like the mummy movies of like, if you disturb the tomb, you're going to get cursed by the mummy. The mummy's going to come back and come after you. Is it magic? Is it a mummy's curse? Or is it aliens? But just the fact that they're they play on I guess the science brain of like the modern human versus people believing in the magic of it. So then, because the art is much more functional, right? The artists, or technically the people who created this art, created the funerary art, whether they were building the architecture of the temples, or they were carving all of the inscriptions and painting all the paintings, they wouldn't be regarded as creative artists. They would be regarded as tradesmen or craftsmen or craftspeople, because they would be commissioned or ordered to create these pieces and these buildings to represent the patron, being the pharaoh, royal family, or the elites who paid for these large-scale monuments. So yes, we can think about it as art history, but when we go back and we think if we're from that time, they weren't necessarily artists how we see artists today. They would be skilled workers, like people who are pro at painting these funerary drawings.
Right.
So then, Egyptian art style. When you think of Egyptian art style, it is actually a standard of which is called the figural painting, a black outline of a figure with flat areas of color. That actual standard was followed for thousands of years. So even though when we dig up something or see something that represents Old Kingdom and New Kingdom, which are 2,000 to 3,000 years apart, the art style stays relatively similar or relatively the same. So that's an amazement in itself. Yeah, exactly. That the art style was like to a T, to a standard. So almost to like, I think it's outlasted maybe like Renaissance, like figural drawings of like Leonardo da Vinci and Galileo's era of like figural drawings and human drawings. Like their art style didn't necessarily last thousands of years because it's still only a couple hundred years ago of their art. But Egyptian art, like the standard. Oh, let me show the cover. Yeah, like the standard like figural art where it's like flat and it's like where you have like the arms, and it's always like funny to look at Egyptian art and like the arms are really weird looking where you have like these weird arms and they're like angled a certain way. But yeah, so those I have like a bunch of books. Yeah, they're like like this, and they're like moonwalking and stuff. So
throughout all of Egyptian history, the art basically stays the exact same.
Yeah, until Akhenaten, but he's another guy I'll talk about next time.
Okay.
He's the guy who flipped the table. But everybody else is like, even Akhenaten. The story's not about him, but he was the one who disrupted not only the art style but also the religion. So when he became pharaoh, he changed the religion and like basically wanted to delete the old religion and make a new one. But then after him was I think it was King Tut and a few people, and they brought it back like to the old-fashioned way because they're like, Akhenaten was a weird guy. We're gonna remove trace of what he did because it was too weird.
All right.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's kind of crazy because in like European history, art and religion and everything changes like every couple hundred years, at least. Reformation, Enlightenment, Industrial Revolution, Cubism, Modernism, Minimalism. Yeah. It's like keeps changing, but the Egyptians were just like, yeah, this is fine. This works.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, this is all, and now we're in the computer age where it's like people are, I think like we're even in a deeper computer age of creating digital art because like people can create digital 3D art or 2D art or like comic books or like even like 3D modeling and like more complex things or really simple things like, some and then even like the like technique to make it too, because like I don't know if you've seen like Jax on his iPad. He plays Minecraft on the iPad. So he like in the bottom left corner is like the arrows, and he runs around and like drops the blocks, and he's so fast at it. And I'm like sitting here like, you do that without a mouse and like a mouse and a keyboard, but he's doing it on the iPad, and he's like he's on the iPad. And so and then when he switches over to a drawing app on the iPad, he's using the touch screen, so he's using his finger to draw really great pictures. But like he practices on paper with pencil, and then he like puts it to the iPad and like draws them. And so now we're in like a crazy age where like I don't even know how art historians can study the current art 20 years from now, because I feel like technology is going to make art even more
diversified, crazy.
Yeah. Like VR or AR and all these things. So it's interesting to go back to look at ancient art and and see innovation there, and see how it can't be possible now, for sure. So yeah, so then with the kingdoms of ancient Egypt, the New Kingdom is the youngest kingdom. It started about the 1400s, and the New Kingdom signified a change in burial practices. So in the Old Kingdom and the Middle Kingdom, they were buried closer to, like buried at Giza and Saqqara, so where the Great Pyramids are, and the Sphinx. So Old and Middle Kingdom, those pharaohs were buried over there. However, all tombs were essentially robbed very shortly after their burials. You know, Egyptian kingdoms often enslaved non-Egyptians, or enslaved the lower classes, and enslaved a lot of people to build these tombs. So the tombs were so lush and lavish and filled with goods, like you know, it signifies literally a pyramid of power. Like the people at the bottom are always going to break in and try and steal stuff because you're hoarding all the wealth into the top of the pyramid. So by the New Kingdom, you need to break the two main elements apart. You need to separate the tomb and the temple. The temple being the public temple for people to visit, people to pay respects, because of the mourning period was so long, and to hide the tomb from robbers. So making the temple being very elaborate and very, you know, nice to look at, was kind of like a distraction, so that the tomb could be hidden somewhere else and hopefully not robbed, but it, you know, that's never a guarantee.
Okay.
So then the kings of the New Kingdom were buried in a place called the Valley of the Kings, a place in the Western Desert to hide the royal tombs deep underground, so that the temples would be a bit closer to the city. They were accessible to worshippers and really elaborate. And then all the actual tombs of the bodies were deep underground in like a desolate desert, like outside of town. So we have Queen Hatshepsut is the subject of my story today. She was a pharaoh who reigned from 1473 to 1458, almost 20 years during the New Kingdom period. So this is BCE, so before zero. Egyptian society, as you know, or we all understand, that was mostly ruled by male gods and men at the time. But we'll start with her father being Thutmose I. He was a pharaoh, and she actually accompanied him on military campaigns. She eventually married Thutmose II. I think he's a half-brother. And she became queen and also king's daughter. I mean, Egyptian pharaohs, much like a lot of other royal families, are products of incest. Definitely. But she did gain two titles. So she marries her half-brother, becomes queen, and she still has the title king's daughter because she is the daughter, like the first daughter of the previous pharaoh. Unfortunately, Thutmose II, he only died after a year. And then the heir was Thutmose III. I think it says here that he's he's a stepson / nephew. So it wasn't her actual biological son. And he was a toddler at the time, so like 2 or 3 years old. Because she was still alive, she became regent. So she became the adult in power to help the young person rule and, you know, pass on the throne to him. So she was named regent and then mistress of the two lands, because she's still regarded as the king's daughter, Thutmose I. She was the queen as being married to Thutmose II. And so because of her, you know, she had that stature herself. So she became mistress of the two lands, again, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. However, within the first 2 to 3 years, she declares herself co-ruler and begins to appear in art wearing traditional male-dominated symbols of power. So when we look at the evolution of the statues that she wore, it indicates a major decrease in feminine features and an increase in masculine features, so that by year 7 of her rule, she declared herself as king of Upper and Lower Egypt, as the sole ruler. So her stepson/nephew, by the time he was 10, he was no longer king because his stepmother/aunt was like, never mind, I'm going to be the king.
All right.
There you go. So that is what is currently happening with Hatshepsut now.
Cool.
I think if I want to share my screen so that I can show people the evolution of her images. So I don't know if you can see this first image. Okay. Can you see like the full screen?
Yeah, you can see the full screen.
All right. So yeah, so this evolution, female appearance with breasts. She has a soft face. It's characteristically female because the male face will eventually have that the
beard
baguette,
thing.
The baguette beard. Yeah. She's wearing a Nemus headdress on the throne, so she has like breasts here. And then eventually a reduction in femininity, so she's still slim, but then is wearing a kilt with a bull's tail. And then it's also a nude upper body with a feminine face. And then this last one, increasingly masculine. Now she has the false beard right here. So she has a big rectangle beard. I keep holding my hand here. And she's in an offering pose to Amun-Ra, which is the sun god. So that would be the role that the male pharaoh would do. He's the one offering. He's the one who's the direct link to the sun god. So yeah, so this is within the first 7 years of her rule. She had the backing of the priests at the time. Like they accepted her as the king because they just went along with it of like, okay, she has the bloodline because she's the daughter of a king, and she's survived one pharaoh already, and she's on the second pharaoh, but she's still older, and Thutmose III is just like a kid, so he can't necessarily do anything. He can be king later. So therefore, the artisans and the craftspeople, they accepted their job to create images of her in a more masculine way. So that signifies the assertion of her power too, that people are believing in her as the king instead of the queen. Yeah.
Right.
So then, lastly, for her funerary temple, it's at Deir el-Bahri, and it's built in the Valley of the Kings, and it is above ground. So remember, the tombs are all hidden underground somewhere else, and the funerary temples are meant to be entered and used by the people. So that's why they're above ground there. We want the robbers to be distracted over there instead.
All right.
So her tomb is huge in that it has at least 3 shrines, one to Amun-Ra, one to Anubis, and one to Hathor. This shrine also includes a shrine to her father, Thutmose I, and she claims legitimate heir, as in there's a depiction of her and Thutmose I, like conveying the message that Thutmose I intended for her to rule. So her father intended for her to rule, not necessarily for her to be married to the king. So that's what's claimed on the walls there. She is shown in images as a sphinx. She's shown in images again in poses of offering and just wearing all of the symbols of male rulership and depicting her as male. Then, lastly, there's this other terrace that is like a story to her about her, right? Where Amun-Ra wants to sire the next king of Egypt. He suggests the wife of Thutmose I, and Amun conceives Hatshepsut in immaculate conception. So not only is there's one drawing where she is like, her father, Thutmose I, grants her kingship. Another story makes the sun god conceiving her with her mother as like a Jesus, right?
Yeah.
So trying to like doubling down on like, not only am I the daughter of a pharaoh and the pharaoh wanted me to be king, but I am the daughter of a god for real, like through Immaculate Conception. So that's doubling down on Hatshepsut is pharaoh. Don't call her queen, call her pharaoh. And then Thutmose I in the ending of this story introduces Hatshepsut to the gods, designating her as a legitimate successor, showing showing succession from one god to another. So then we have all of these temples, these terraces, and these multiple drawings of her in male form. I bring that up because not long after her reign and after her passing, she has been deliberately chiseled out of scenes. Her in active poses, it's been like all of these shrines and reliefs have been dismantled. Like current day, like 20th and 21st century archaeologists are still putting things together, or they've been putting her images back together to try and decipher them, since like I have some sources from like the 1960s of all these drawings, and they're like deliberately carved out or like chiseled out. Yeah, like chiseled out and carved over. So they're this like the end of this story is basically saying that after her, exactly 22 years after her rule, after she dies, all the statues from her temple were cut and dumped into a quarry. The history of her rule disappears from Egyptian history altogether. And Thutmose III, her stepson / nephew, takes the throne as sole ruler, and historians are assuming that as soon as he became king, he became pharaoh. He was so pissed about his childhood that he ordered the destruction of all of these images because of vengeance, bitterness, like resentment. Because a lot of the graffiti that has these images of her in male form, some of the graffiti like cuts out her name and puts Thutmose III. So images literally in her temple or near her tomb where they say Pharaoh Hatshepsut, blah, 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 running with bulls or something. The graffiti of it is like, or the destruction of it is like somebody chisels it out and writes like, scribbles over Thutmose III and like just like tries to cover his name all over it. So that he's like trying to, it's like if we remember like art being so magical, he's trying to erase all of her, he's trying to erase the remnants of her spirit, the remnants of her soul, and just cover it with his own because of his strong resentment towards her for taking over the pharaohship and not letting him rule until she died.
I mean, it sounds really funny, you've been talking about all this like pristine art history and magical qualities and everything, and it just boils down to a kid being angry at his stepmom and just scratching out her name out of everything and just drawing his name in like crayon.
Yeah, it's like old photo albums and you like cut out their face and you're like and like use Sharpie and you're like cut, like, or you're driving like devil horns over people's faces and stuff. Yeah, exactly. So it's like that. So the
Pettiness
destruction, definitely stepmoms, it was, the destruction and the graffiti is like, it doesn't like it happens like after her death, right? So it happens sometime in Thutmose III's rule of like just going back and like trying to do something out of it, or it is like an angsty, bitter teen, like right after he takes the throne, he just has like a fit, and like, for a couple years he just like is ordering people to mess up her tomb. But then it suddenly stops. So we're hoping that Thutmose III, he did reign for a couple decades, so we're hoping that he was just angsty in like the first couple of years and then grew to be a better ruler and like more understanding. So it's like it's we don't lose like the whole buildings we don't lose the whole thing altogether. It's more of statues, like easy things to access and destroy were lost, or the graffiti is like simple chiseling over, just writing someone else's name on top. But it's not like it's totally lost forever. So and a lot of historians or Egyptologists like think about her story for sure, because of, I guess they think of it in like the audacity of her rule, like how could she just like take the throne from her stepson and be like that. But that was just kind of her, that was the kind of her that was just her vibe, or that was just her energy, is that she just wanted to take over. So lastly, I think to end this story, was not only what could her son have been bitter, but the people could have also, like I did say that like, the priests were accommodating, right? They were creating art in the likeness of her, but as a male form. They were following her orders and everything, and followed her around because she declared herself king. So it's kind of like you can't commit treason, right?
Yeah.
And the Tutmos III wasn't old enough yet to reclaim power, and technically he didn't reclaim power until she died. So then the other people in the society, they see this going on. The average person, or maybe some craftsmen, they see this going on and they're like, what are these politicians doing? So I'm going to show the highlight of this story is some more clear graffiti. I mentioned graffiti, or I describe graffiti in this way. It's not necessarily like tagging over something, or like creating a new piece over something. Graffiti as in the act of destroying the original artwork. So destroying the original artwork by carving out her name, writing Tutmos III, or just breaking statues and like trying to cut out scenes, like that is the act of graffiti as well. But this one is more in your face about the graffiti. So if you can see, do I need to zoom in? So graffiti from this is interesting, because we find this in her tomb, and you can see like this article is actually on gender in ancient Egypt, and talking about how it's very possible that gender identity is very fluid and expressive, but it could be another thing as well. So this graffiti is from the tomb of Hatshepsut. It was painted sometime in the art form, in the standard art form of like the angles and stuff. But it was painted sometime after, before it was finally sealed. And it's humorous because we see the headdress right here. This is representing Hatshepsut. So representing Hatshepsut, and then in this interesting position with this other person. This other person is not a royal, and people or historians are saying that this could be her like priest, like administrator, like her like main executive like advisor, Senemut. So people are thinking that it's her and her priest, because I don't believe they married each other. He was just like her, he was like her right hand man. But I think the people of the time, they know that Hatshepsut is a woman, so when you're thinking in like the normal classes of like, okay, it's a consensual heterosexual relationship, but when you put her in the position of she's a pharaoh, so therefore she's going to wear the pharaoh's headdress, and this is another man with a phallic thing coming out of his body, which we know what that is. And so that's why this image is funny, because they're like, oh, is it two men? Who knows? So it's so that kind of story there is is from the graffiti from her tomb. So again, these craftsmen or these artisans are, you know, they're not considered creative people, but they technically are, because they're making a political statement on, you know, if it was just a lewd photo, they wouldn't need to draw the pharaonic headdress on her, like if they just wanted to show that she was in a sexual relationship. But because she has like declared herself king and like has that male gender role attached to her, then the drawing of it kind of amplifies that. Right. So it kind of it doubles down. It doubled down it's like a double down again of of that of her story. So I found a few articles from 1957 that, so think about Egyptology in 1957, very male dominated. So the way that they talk about this image in particular is really funny. So I think I just want to read this.
Sure.
So in let's see. Okay, so in okay. All right. It's really long-winded. Hold on. Okay. So we have from Romer's photograph of the wall, it seems that it is divided into two sections. The left one comprising the inscribed stele of Neferhotep above the lovemaking scene, and the right one consisting of a very similar stele but left uninscribed, and two individuals, a large standing figure behind whom a smaller male with an erect phallus advances. Romer's discussion does not indicate how he interprets the relationship of these two figures. If one does attempt to relate them, then one is faced with the peculiar situation in which at the right, Senimut is the potential object of a homosexual relationship, while in the scene of sexual intercourse at the left, Senimut demonstrates heterosexuality. This one was from the 80s. Okay, so 1984, they're just, the way that academics are writing about sexual intercourse is really funny. It's just, the scene of sexual intercourse depicts a method of approach from the rear. It is possible the sexually aroused male approaches the objects of his desire also from the rear. And then it's regarded as a preliminary to the amorous scene at the left. So just, there's the way that they are talking about this. It also like it reflects on, I guess the not being able to describe non-heterosexual intercourse as like, I don't know, as like real, or as like just it's normal. It's just, it's a like all people's experiences are valid, and it almost tries to analyze it as if it's like animals, like wild animals, and not humans like engaging in a relationship. So
yeah, it definitely seems to be coming from the perspective of like you know, this is clearly supposed to be weird, right? And very, you know, unnatural and everything. Also, it seems, Leia, that they don't recognize that it's Hatshepsut, from what it seems like, the academics.
It eventually in the next like paragraph it says the only person of this period who could fill this dual gender role is Hatshepsut, who is universally represented as a male in two-dimensional depictions of her as a king. So it's possible to identify the large figure as Hatshepsut wearing the crown. And then Romer has suggested in commenting upon the absence of the royal insignia. So then it's like the man involved with Hatshepsut might be Siddhamut. There is no. Yeah, it's almost like they're confused of like it could be Hatshepsut or it couldn't be. It's just a sexual picture. But if it's graffiti in her temple, in her tomb, and she has been depicted as the king, the pharaoh, the whole time in the rest of the temple, and it's the craftsmen who have been spending like months and months building all of those things and carving those pictures. You know, it's like if you're commissioned to draw something like elaborate and really beautiful, you have to draw like a stick figure sometimes just to rest your hands and stuff.
Right.
So why wouldn't it be Hatshepsut? It's literally so like when they say some graffiti from the reign of Hatshepsut is the title of the article. It's like it should be some graffiti from the temple of Hatshepsut. Like it's in there. Like it's it's not that it's like from her time period. It's like actually in the walls of her tomb. So so that was interesting to read in those journals there. But yeah. So all of the graffiti is that, you know, Queen Hatshepsut, she was nominated as regent and she was supposed to help her stepson rule, but she took the throne for herself for 20 years. And Thutmose III carved out her name for a couple years and wrote his name over it by the time he was, or to solidify his kingly rule, but yeah, to combat what she had done. And then some people had some commentary on it with some graffiti. Some sexy graffiti.
So it's a very interesting way to make a political comment.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Exactly.
Cool. I'm gonna draw the king getting railed.
Yeah, exactly.
Alright. Cool.
Well, that's the end of my sexy graffiti story.
Awesome.
What's next?
Alright. Well, just go into what I've got then on Franz Ferdinand, and I guess I can probe you with the same question that you the same kind of question you gave me. So, what do you know about Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand?
Oh, I have the CD of the band Franz Ferdinand.
I know. We used to listen to it all the time.
I know. Yeah. I did not know about Archduke Franz Ferdinand before I knew about the band Franz Ferdinand. They're like are they a one-hit wonder? Like they had that really popular song, and then I bought their CD.
Yeah, I think so. I think you could consider them a one-hit wonder. With Take Me Out.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it was like that CD, but the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, he was assassinated, and it started World War I.
Right.
And that's it. That's all I know.
Right,
I know about Hoover and attempting to start. Wait. The League of Nations. Was that in his 14 points?
Yeah, that was the 14th point, I think.
But then the U.S. didn't join the League of Nations.
Right, because they didn't accept the other 13.
Oh.
Something like that. Yeah.
So I remember World War I being like Hoover did this thing, like Hoover wrote this long list of demands or long list of things, and then started the League of Nations, and then the U.S. was like, never mind, I don't want to join the League of Nations anymore.
Yeah.
And trench warfare. That's all I know.
Right. Trench warfare. It's so awful. That's basically it. But yeah, so my topic is the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. It is, very commonly known as the event which kickstarts World War I, which technically isn't true exactly. It is like if you wanted to go the furthest back, it's the one that makes the most sense. But it's not technically. It didn't technically start the war. The war didn't start for another, like a couple months. But yes, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria and his wife Sophie were killed in Sarajevo, assassinated. But the entire situation of the assassination is so hilariously comical that it almost, if you spend enough time, looking at the events, it almost doesn't seem real. So to put context, Archduke Franz Ferdinand is the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. He is, I believe he's the oldest son of the emperor at the time of Austria-Hungary, and he made a simple trip to the Baltic region. It's the Baltics, right? I might just got that wrong. Well, anyway, to Bosnia, Serbia.
Yeah, the Baltic states. Yeah.
Herzegovina, those places, and he did so. There's not a clear consensus as to why exactly, but we know that politically, the most likely reason is just essentially a show of force, because Bosnians and Serbians at the time were, not feeling so great about being under Austro-Hungarian rule, and they were, there was rebellious movements and everything, and so Franz Ferdinand was there, went down there, the heir to the throne, to essentially instill order, make everybody see, look, Austria-Hungary is here, we're here and we're not going away, that sort of thing.
To assert dominance?
Basically, yeah. And he did so also because he was there to oversee military exercises. So the Austro-Hungarian army was there to perform for him, and it's a show of force essentially. Some sources also say that it's possible that the Archduke and his wife went there both to fulfill their political duties as the military leader of Austria-Hungary, but also maybe as a vacation, get away from the palace and tour the Baltic states and relax a little bit. So they plan the date out and they go. And now normally this would be a mundane thing, but first mistake is Archduke Franz Ferdinand arrives in Sarajevo on June 28th, which we don't know for sure if he didn't realize the significance of the date, but the 28th of June is a very important day for Serbians and Bosnians. It's a both a sort of religious holiday and a political holiday. It's kind of like it celebrates one of the great battles against the Ottoman Empire, when the Ottoman Empire took over the Baltics. And I believe it's to celebrate the death of one of the sultans that got killed by a Serbian. So it has a lot of significance in that region, and it's celebrated. I can't remember the exact name of the holiday now, but it's like it still has weight to this day in that region. And so the principal leader of Austria-Hungary, the oppressor state, comes down to Serbia during this like momentous day. It's like it's almost like if after the Mexican-American War, the American president came down to Mexico on like Mexican Independence Day or something. It's like, hey, what's up, guys? Remember when I beat your ass? Like so.
Oh, if like the Queen of England came to visit on July 4th.
Yeah, exactly. Just say, why are you here? Some people think that maybe Franz Ferdinand knew that the holiday was happening and was joining for the festivities. Some people think that he's just so they portray him as like a dumb Austrian that didn't know any better and just picked that day randomly. We don't know for sure, but yeah. So that's the first problem, is that he decides to come on this like momentous day, which inspires a group of self-proclaimed freedom fighters, known as Young Bosnia, a splinter group of the organization known as the Black Hand. And these young Bosnians were all young adults from, I believe, the range was like 18 to 25. And they're young, angry men, and hearing the news that the Archduke is going to arrive in Sarajevo, they plan his assassination. And they plotted for that day, inspired by the martyrs of that holiday from however many years ago. They say, what a perfect symbolic occasion. We killed the Sultan, in the past for this holiday. Now we shall kill, what they see as the new Sultan.
Like perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So the plot thickens. So the day goes out, and another thing which shows you the difference between how we do visits in the modern day and in the past is that the Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke's entire travel plan was published, and everybody knew it. So everybody knew which route he was going on, when the parade would happen, what places he's visit, so that they would all come and join and celebrate and everything. His whole itinerary is just out there, which means that all the terrorists and all the assassins that wanted to take his life also had that itinerary at the same time. Which, like, nowadays you would never see that, right? It's like the Secret Service would never let the president say anything about where they're going or where they're going to be. I think there was I think Trevor Noah said once when he was filming President Obama when he was in office that they don't get a specific time when the president arrives. They get a window, and he just shows up whenever, so that just in case nobody knows exactly where anybody is at any time.
Yeah.
But then it was like, the Archduke's coming at 7 a.m. He's going to be here. At 10 a.m. he's going to be here. And yeah. So, they get in a motorcade and proceed down the streets of Sarajevo. And mistake number, I think we're on 3 now, is when everybody boards onto the convoy to get... I believe they were driving towards Town Hall. A group of local police officers accidentally get on one of the cars instead of the Archduke's Secret Service, essentially. So, and I believe it was a convoy of like 3 to 5 cars, and a group of random local cops just saw the car and were like, oh, we should get on there, and get on. So like a squad basically of the Archduke's personal guards just gets left behind, and the motorcade keeps going. So like security is so low that it's like again, bringing back the modern day. It's like if the president was doing a parade in LA, and one car of the LAPD or one car of the Secret Service just doesn't pick up any Secret Service agents, and a bunch of random like LAPD street cops just get on. This was like, oh hey, car's here, and just get on. It's like, what? So yeah.
Yeah, it's like a whole convoy. Yeah, a whole convoy. 5 cars turn right, and 1 car turns left.
It's just crazy. But anyway, continuing on, there is a group of I believe it is 7-ish, around 7 members of Young Bosnia are tasked with the assassination, and they're placed by their organizer on different points along the route down the street, so that just in case if anyone screws up. So they send the crowd. There's a bunch of people around, and they all cheer and everything. And the convoy moves on. A lot the motorcade passes by each of the assassins. I believe the first like 3 or 4, and nothing happens. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I believe they testify in their trial, which is written in a book called the Sarajevo Trial, and some of them, at least one of them, has a bomb or a gun, but sees that the Archduke is with his wife, and then backs off. And it's like, oh, but I can't, I can't kill his wife. His wife didn't do anything wrong, and so they back off. Another person goes to assassinate, but because there's so much presence around that they get nervous, and they end up not throwing their bomb either. And finally, once someone acts, this is about the 3rd or 4th assassin. Finally, once the motorcade passes and they act, the next assassin takes a bomb or a grenade and lights it up and hastily throws it at the car. But I don't know if you know a lot about bomb throwing or grenade throwing, but you're supposed to, light the fuse or pull the pin. You're supposed to wait like 2 or 3 seconds, and then you throw it, so that it detonates on impact. Apparently, this guy was so hyped up to do it that he just throws it immediately. So all the bomb does is it flies over the heads of the crowd, and then it bounces off the Archduke's car and into the motorcade, and it blows up one of the other cars instead, and hurts some people in the crowd. Everybody, screams and scatters, and the assassination is foiled, and no one gets killed. And so the assassin, he turns, and he takes a bite of a cyanide pill, and then leaps off the bridge to kill himself. Unfortunately, during that time, the river was extremely low tide, so it was only a couple centimeters deep. So he just leaps into the river, and instead of going deep, he just smacks into the ground. And then, the cyanide pill that he ingested was past its expiry date.
Oh
no! So instead of killing him, it just made him feel really ill and vomit. So he just flew into the river, probably broke or sprained his legs and ankles, and was just throwing up in the river while the cops just came down and arrested him. And meanwhile, the Archduke in his car speeds off and goes away.
So this guy survived his suicide attempt?
Yes, both things he tried to do to kill himself, jump into the river and take the cyanide pill, neither of them worked. So he survived and he got taken to jail.
What a belly flop.
Yeah, really. Yeah. So
gotta check my expiration dates on all my pills then.
Yeah. So the Archduke speeds off to town hall, and the rest of the motorcade goes. And the governor who's riding alongside him is super concerned and everything. It's like, we need to lock you down. We have to make sure you're safe and everything. And the other assassins, there's 2 or 3 others. Their mission's over. They essentially abort, from what we know. And the governor's freaking out. He's like, "Oh, we can't do this. Your plans are ruined. There's people out to kill you, and everything." And Franz Ferdinand, he's angry at first. Obviously, someone just tried to kill him. But eventually he calms down and he decides, you know what? Actually, instead of just holding up, or instead of just going on the original route, why don't we go to the hospital where the people that got injured by the bomb were taken, and we'll do a hospital visit. We'll boost morale there and everything. And so everyone's like, great, all right. And then the governor contracts this idea, and it's like, oh, okay, if we're going to do that, we should take this alternate route that goes, kind of around and straight there, instead of turning onto the original route, which would head through the busy Bazaar Street in Sarajevo, and there'd be too many people. So for their safety, the governor thinks to, and tells all the drivers that that they're going to go on this alternate route. Meanwhile, one of the assassins, named of Gabriela Princip, the sources say that he places himself outside of a bakery, a food shop, essentially. There is a popular story that during this time he was eating, and being defeated over the fact that the assassination didn't work out, because by the time the motorcade will leave town hall, it had already been like 30 minutes of waiting. So he places himself there, and obviously the assassination has already gone awry. They've missed their chance, and if the governor and all of the Archduke's detail do their jobs well, then the Archduke's gonna make it out of here and alive and fine.
Yeah.
So another thing that goes wrong. The motorcade gets ready to leave, and everybody heads out. All the Serbian drivers head forward, and they go on the governor's route. However, nobody remembered to tell Franz Ferdinand's driver, which came with him from Austria, who doesn't know Sarajevo at all, and he's confused, and nobody remembers to tell him that there's a different route that everyone's going on. So,
How? Wait.
Somehow it's apparently the governor tells someone else to tell the driver, and that communication never went through. Somehow it just gets screwed up, and also he only speaks German, so he doesn't actually can't directly I believe it's hard for him to directly communicate with the governor, who is sitting in the same car. So it's like nobody remembers and nobody realizes it until it's too late. And they go on the alternate route, and everybody drives down, and the German driver, the Archduke's driver, takes a right turn to go down what the original planned route was, to go down into the Bazaar district and towards the museum. And as soon as he takes that right turn and is separated from the pack, essentially, the governor who's sitting alongside him yells at him and says, "Hey, what are you doing? You went down the wrong street. You're supposed to keep going on Opal Way." And he's like, "Oh, whatever." And so the car, which was going full speed, just comes to a sudden stop, and it stops there, and the driver has to, change the gears and move it back. This is, of course, 1914, so cars aren't exactly great at reversing suddenly back then. And it just so happens that where they ended up just coming to a full stop is in front of the food shop where Gavrilo Princip is standing. And he looks up and he sees the Archduke. Not only does he see the Archduke drive by, he sees the Archduke just full on stop right in front of him as the governor is yelling at the driver, presumably in broken German or in Serbian, "Stop, you're going the wrong way, turn around," and everything. And the driver's all confused. Gavrilo Princip, having, seizing the moment, walks up to the Archduke's car, point blank, fires 2 shots, and kills both Sophie and the Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
Oh man.
Yeah. So that's it, and that starts off the July Crisis, and throws all the events in line to eventually have the start of the First World War. Is a large, long sequence of fuck-ups, essentially, that just result in a successful assassination.
That is like... It's like someone who is just notoriously clumsy and they still make it out alive. Like, I don't know how you're walking on 2 feet. Like, you're like, it's like you bump into a door, a vase falls, you drop a knife, you slip on ice cubes, and then you're like, whoa,
it's like it's like one of the old cartoons where or Tom and Jerry, where like everything's just coming down and. But that's the whole story. Everything happens just like that, and the Archduke manages to avoid his downfall for a little while, but he essentially gets Final Destination, and and finally
that
gets.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Because he, yeah. He escaped the bomb. He escaped the bomb because the guy missed. He threw the bomb over him. He escaped just getting run over. Wow. Yeah. That is quite the final destination assassination.
Yeah.
So why is it that in history textbooks, like, it's just, oh, a royal from the Austro-Hungarian Empire was assassinated, and then that started a war. Like, that's it. They don't talk about the Black Hand or anything. They just talk about political turmoil in these multiple small countries and the, like, dissolution of royalty and monarchs. But again, we learn it from the American perspective, so the American perspective doesn't necessarily care about the logistics of, intra-European continental political challenges.
Yeah.
The U.S. is almost like, we're just waiting to get tagged in, bro. Like, tag us in to join the fight.
Basically. Or, well, yeah, a lot of, like, U.S. history is spent on, like, isolationism, and we always are by ourselves until they kill Americans, and then we're in there, and then we're bring our trench guns and start shooting people. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's just like, I think it's, in our country, a lot of the education is so American-centric that we don't really think about it from, in the details. It's just sort of a footnote. It's just like, oh, this is the event that starts World War I, and, whatever. Additionally to that, it also, like, that explanation sort of bypasses the whole, like, cultural context of the assassination, too, because it's not like just one dude woke up one day and decided to shoot the Archduke. It's like, this was the Austro-Hungarians had already caused a slight on Bosnia and Serbia for taking them over. The Archduke was here was essentially a holiday for them, very important holiday, and this was not just a statement of what, this was not just a random assassination, but this was a political movement. Like the reason that, like, the Austro-Hungarians' ultimatum isn't answered is because a lot of Bosnians and Serbians, even to this day, actually, another interesting thing is that even to this day they see the assassination as justified, as this is this was this had to happen, this was what broke us, this is what gave us our freedom. This was against tyranny in the same way that it was before. So it's there's a lot of context and a lot of understanding around it that's a lot more than just a royal dude got shot today and now we're going to war.
Yeah. World War I basically dissolves the Austro-Hungarian Empire, right?
Yes. In the end, the Austro-Hungarian Empire dissolves very quickly after the war.
So then, like, World War I is almost like, because if I remember, I think I'm also getting a little bit confused because I watched Hetalia, the anime. So I'm getting confused.
With their bad history.
But the historical facts are valid, or they're real, and they are attached to the characters in Hetalia.
Yeah, they're not. It's not entirely inaccurate. It's it's just a.
But yeah, like, it's like World War I is it didn't necessarily it doesn't involve the U.S. until someone tags us in and asks for help. Is that?
Until the bombing of the Lusitania, and then when German U-boats sink the Lusitania, then the U.S. does officially enter the war.
Was that an American ship?
Yeah, it was an American ship.
Oh, got it. Okay. Okay.
It was an American passenger vessel, I think, or cargo vessel or something. But it was also because that vessel was being used to transport weapons and armor to the United Kingdom too. So it was like to Great Britain. So it's like
makes sense.
It's kind of justified, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's not a lot of focus in the educational system on the context of the Baltic states or anything. Another fun fact about the assassination that is pretty interesting is Gavrilo Princip and all the conspirators, after they pull off the assassination, Gavrilo Princip only actually gets 20 years in prison for killing a member of the royal family. He only gets 20 years of prison because he, at the time, was 19 and considered not an adult, essentially. He was considered too young, so his maximum sentence was 20 years. And so by the time that the war is over, in 1934, so when the war is over and when World War II hasn't even started yet, he could have walked out of prison a free man, even though he, we know him famously as like the assassin that starts the war. He could have essentially avoided the whole thing and lived on. He doesn't, though, unfortunately, because he dies of tuberculosis in prison. But yeah,
a lot of people get tuberculosis in that.
Yeah, not a lot of great medical health back then.
No.
But yeah, he doesn't get the death sentence like a lot of his co-conspirators, despite the fact that he is the one that ends up pulling the trigger.
Oh, interesting. Oh, so everyone else served life in prison.
Yeah, not everybody else, but the ones that are old enough to get that sentencing, they get hanged.
I see.
Or a couple of them, but all of them that are young, like Gavrilo, just get off with, like 10 to 20 years in prison, and then they get to walk away. Just kind of crazy.
And Archduke Franz Ferdinand was heir to the throne. Okay.
Yeah.
Have there been any political assassinations in this century, like in the last 20 years?
Have there been any political assassinations?
Yeah, because I feel like is that like the most? Would you call the 1914 assassination the most recent? No, right? Because there've been a few more political assassinations like of that kind of grand scale. This one is historically considered the start of a war. Like we have Kennedy was assassinated. But I can't.
Yeah, but I can't think of any other assassinations that had this much weight to it. Yeah, because like other assassinations and assassination attempts, they don't result in any major upheavals or change or events or anything.
Right.
Not that I can think of. But yeah, because like the assassination of the like presidential assassinations we've had in the U.S., they don't result in anything necessarily. At least like not as grand as starting a war. Like
a world war.
Yeah. All right.
Cool. Well, thanks. Do we want to tease what our next topics will be? Do you have a phrase already for your next topic?
No, actually. I don't have a phrase yet.
That's okay. Me neither. Yeah. But did we want to do any follow-up, like brief comments on episode 1, which is our Mulan podcast that's on YouTube? Do we have any follow-up comments after recording that? Because I know we recorded that like 2 days after Mulan released, so there has been more information coming out about Mulan.
Yeah.
I wanted to know if you wanted to speak on anything
that
we may have missed because we recorded it before.
I mean, for me, I think Mulan, like some of the comments that we made about like particular Chinese historical inaccuracies were like a little bit debatable. I think that besides like what we mentioned, the haka buildings and then the clothing and everything, I think for the most part, looking back at it, and seeing that like it was filmed in China and all that, a lot of the time frame and historical inaccuracies that we pointed out aren't as bad or aren't a problem like we thought they were. But the key takeaway, I think, in all of it is like it's Mulan, in my opinion, it feels way too fantasy and way too like obsessed with the very, I guess, tropey is the word.
Okay.
Yeah, because like the bad guys that we see are like semi-magical. They're all dark and everything. And they wear dark clothing and everything. Which also, by the way, is I don't think I mentioned it before, but that's wrong for Mongolians. Mongolian outfits are just as colorful as Chinese outfits. They're greens and yellows and reds and blues. So just having them in like essentially black turbans is kind of, weird. And also the inclusion of the sorceress or the witch that they call her is both like it doesn't fit in the Mulan story because it's like Chinese culture, Chinese mythology doesn't really have a concept of witches or anything, or like evil women or things like that. Like it's still it's historically it's still pretty male dominated, but there's not that sort of like it's not like European witches and hags and even so far as like Greek sirens and things that you have this like particular feminine problem. It's magic is chi is universal. It just feels like they put in those beats not necessarily to serve the story, but to put what people expect. The bad guy that becomes good, the bad guy who's really bad and really powerful, the good guy, the mentor who's like super awesome, but he's and approves of Mulan and everything, and everybody has magic powers. And Mulan is a destiny child. She's force sensitive and all that stuff like to it just feels like it. I think we mentioned it before that Mulan felt like it could have been literally anything and it wouldn't have changed it at all. The fact that it's called Mulan and it's set in China didn't feel like it really meant anything.
And
I still think it's Star Wars. Like, it just seems like a bad Star Wars fan film to me. But
I've heard some comments. I think like to rebuttal against me to say like, oh well, it's Disney. What do you expect? But it's like, we can expect more representation wise. There has to be a point where we want them to, where we demand Disney and any other media company to stop butchering stories, to stop butchering them in a way that is disrespectful, So I think that was a major point for me of like, hey, like, why not? Why can't we demand these expectations of accuracies, respectful interpretations of culture, and just having the talent and having the research done. I think it was even, there have been a lot of social media was blowing up about it, right? Asian American social media was popping off about Mulan, saying things like the costume director barely did any research. I think it was something costume designer is deemed not knowledgeable enough to accurately depict the cultural background in clothing. She said she had researched by visiting European museums with Chinese departments and going on a 3-week trip to China. That's her credential on costume designing Mulan. Is I went to
a couple museums and took some outfits.
Yes, and I went to China for 3 weeks.
Okay.
So yeah, so that is what that is something poor that I feel like it's not too like it's not outlandish to demand better representation for it. I think I saw on some Facebook group there was like an indie production. They were trying to make like a gritty martial arts like 90s 2000s version of was it Mulan? But it was like a 90s 2000s martial arts like story of like Mulan but set in Chinatown.
Oh. Like, that sounds really cool.
Yeah. and it was like all Asian American talent and like stunt guys and stuff and like original music and everything, and I was like, whoa, that seems sick. Like that is a great reimagining of Mulan. Whereas Disney's production was like, you know, marketing claimed that they were going to be inspired by the Ballad of Mulan, but then you and me having like read through the lyrics of the Ballad of Mulan, the source material is there. Yeah, it's like
but
1,000 years old, or you know, it's like 1,500 years old, but it's there, and it wasn't a reflection. It wasn't a reflection of the source material.
Yeah, it was the only tie back I could see was that one throwaway line that they used where it was just like, oh, the two rabbits when they're running, you can't tell them apart. It's like just in the beginning, and it had no weight whatsoever. But it's supposed to be. It still upsets me because that's the last line of the ballad, and it's supposed to be, you know, look at how great Mulan is. You know, people say that if you see two rabbits, you can't tell if they're male or female. To say like, you know, what's really different about us. But in the Mulan we watched, it was just like, haha, rabbits. It was like,
oh yeah, I think that having more callback to it was would have been impactful. You're right. The one personal thing that I have, because I love the animated Mulan so much, is her scene where she's transforming, right? It's like the 80s rock ballad. She like lights incense, it starts raining, and then she takes the sword and cuts her hair and it's like transformed. Like I am Mulan the warrior. Like that, like 2 minutes of like animation and music and like cinematic beauty is like such an important piece for me, like as a person, because every time I cut my hair short, I play that scene while Tawny cuts my hair. So I play that scene because it's like I'm transforming, I'm a new version of myself. Like I need to cut away the past and blah blah blah, because I feel like when I cut my hair really short, it signifies a new chapter in my life.
Sure.
So that scene is so important. And her scene of her transforming into Warrior Mulan was not that impactful at all.
Yeah.
It was almost like super fast. I feel like
I don't remember it happening.
She was like with her dad, and then her dad goes to sleep, so then it's her. She takes the stuff and leaves. Like there's no cutting her hair, there's no lighting incense. I don't remember seeing her lighting incense.
We never see her respect her ancestors.
In the shrine place, I don't see her in the shrine place like lighting incense. Like I feel like lighting incense would have been a major thing to do, because I feel like the father, Tai Ma, the actor, he lit incense at one point.
It's like when she leaves, he does go to the shrine to like ask for them to protect her, but
but I don't see her doing that. Like so that was a huge missed that was a huge like missed point that they could have redone in some way. So yeah. So I will always cherish that haircutting from the animated movie.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Do you see if there's any notes in the chat or if there's any people?
There have been people dipping in and out, but
that's cool.
Don't have any chat.
Okay. Cool. Right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. This was the Pick Our Dang Brains podcast. We're two siblings who want to drop surprising knowledge and facts about history, art, and everything in between. Join us for episode 3 sometime when we're ready to discover these keywords. Cool. Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Bye.